Kudos to an outgoing president.
72 hours?
We're going to actually find out exactly because I have a clock that I sent, one of these clocks you put on and it tells it by the second. So as soon as I find it, we will tell you exactly how many days and minutes Mr. Beckham has left.
How do you feel, Quentin Beckham, before we start the show?
It's wonderful and terrible all at once.
Ooh.
Yeah, the end of the benevolent overlord. So I think I become immediate past benevolent overlord. That's going to be the new title.
And
it's hard to fit on a badge.
And the soon-to-be benevolent overlord?
That would be Pam Dent.
Pam Dent. Well, Pam Dent, we love Pam Dent on the program. Nikki, before we start, how do you feel?
I think it's a marvelous Monday, and I'm happy to be here.
Marvelous Monday.
I like it. I love the positivity from Nikki Chambliss.
1 day, 13 hours, 42 minutes, and 38, 37, 36 seconds.
Oh, is that the Quentin presidential calendar?
I've got
He's got a countdown.
I got a countdown I set up.
He's got a
He's
calendar.
got a
Title
countdown.
done with 2 exclamation points.
Very exciting, guys. Twitter, I'll get to these direct messages here. Coming in for QB, the benevolent dictator from some agents. Nikki Chambliss will rock and roll on the program as well. J-Dubs, we're in your hands. Let's do it. Good Monday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the Monday Market Monitor. Thank you kindly for joining us. One of our favorite shows we do, a recap of the weekend that was and a look into the week that's going to be here on the I Love Seville Network. Of course, we're live in Charlottesville, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world on the I Love Seville Network. Today, we are presented by Ally Property Management. Ally Property Management, trusted name in the property management game, and our friends at Closure Title and Settlement Company, helping dreams become reality at Closure Title and Settlement Company. Judah Wickhauer is our director. Let's go to that studio camera, J-Dubs, and let's welcome our friends on a very holiday-esque Monday Market Monitor here in December. As Nikki has said, it's a marvelous Monday. Good morning, Nikki. How are you?
Good morning. I am great. I'm really, really happy to be here yet again.
So I think we need to change the name of the show to Marvelous Monday.
Marvelous Monday's great. I
I'm
love
here
the
for that.
positivity from Nikki.
Mr. Beckham, introduce yourself to about the 6 people in the state of Virginia that do not know you, maybe even the nation.
Right. I appreciate that, although it's hyperbole.
I was going to go worldwide, but
You know,
I didn't want to stretch it, but too
let's
far.
not push it. I'm Quentin Beckham. I'm the soon-to-be outgoing president of the Charlottesville Area Association of Realtors and the owner-broker for Keller Williams Alliance.
You want to know how much time we got left exactly?
Yes,
How much time?
I do.
He's got a timer.
1 day, 13 hours, 40 minutes, 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds. Look at this, right down the 40.
It's counting down.
How do you feel the term went, Quentin?
It was fun and
Yeah.
interesting and work and difficult and all of those things all wrapped together.
What you expected?
No and yes.
Okay.
So I don't know that any of us at the time that we ran for the offices for the last several years
Pandemic.
were expecting what we got.
Right.
But I had the good fortune of not being in the front car of that train. And so I had a little better idea of where to go with it. But
Little
he's-
shout out to Tom Wolfolk. He
Oh
took
my
that
gosh.
on the
Yeah.
chin.
Love you, Tom.
You know, we were all in a room the other day going to Teely Jennifer, who was president before Tom, and Tom was there, and so was I. And we were talking about how we had all spent that time together. And beginning with Teely's presidency, you know, things became interesting.
So, Nikki, introduce yourself to everybody, because I don't think...
Who am I? I don't know. I am Nikki Chambliss. I am team leader at Keller Williams Alliance.
Great people.
Yeah, I think they're fantastic. If there was a better place to be, that's where I'd be, right?
Well, you're great people.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So we usually start the show off with, what happened last week, and I've been tracking, we're on week number 14, and I usually just focus on, actives, so, homes that just came on the market and pending. And since we are graph and bar chart and spreadsheet geeks around here, this last week, and this is just the car footprint, we had 57 new homes come on, 79 go into pending. But week over week, that's a bit of a jump. Last week we had 44 come on, and this week 57, and last week we had 89 go off. So we're having a little bit more come on the market, a little bit less come off. We kind of try to take a deep dive into, or a cursory dive anyway. Why do we think this is changing from week to week? But again, over 14 weeks, we've only basically had 4 of those 14 weeks kind of either close to par or a little bit above what's coming on and going off. We usually start the show kicking off on that and see where everybody wants to take it. And since the outgoing president is about ready to take a sip of coffee, we'll ask him a question, because that's the perfect timing to do that. So, Mr. Beckham, why do you think we're doing this seesaw thing up
Just
and
for
down?
all of you out there, if somebody asks you a question, you're not ready, just have a drink with you.
Yeah. Except the person needs to actually recognize
Pro
that
tip.
and decide not to ask you a question.
you get
It's
it.
kind of like what I do to Jerry when
You take a sip, it gives you a minute to gather your thoughts,
Gather your thoughts.
you know.
or
There's also-
defer the question. You could do that
later
if
in
you
the show,
want.
we'll talk about pivot and how you
Oh,
pivot.
man.
away from questions.
no.
The word pivot.
No,
Bring out my magic wand. Bring out my magic wand.
I do think what you're seeing is, if you go pre-pandemic, there was a definitive, repetitive curve
Sure.
to houses coming on the market and selling that saw a dip as we entered winter, and people were more settled, and there was colder weather, and nobody wants to move in cold weather. And you're seeing a little bit of a return to that. It's just not accompanied by much of a change in price.
Sure.
And probably still a fair number of buyers out there, so I'm curious to see how December finishes out. You can tell in these graphs that we've got in front of us, you can certainly see a difference the week of Thanksgiving. The week of Thanksgiving and the week prior, number of homes and number that went pending was much smaller. You could feel people take their breath, and then it picked right back up again. So I'm just curious if we're going to see something similar where we have a nice pace until you hit the holiday 2-week period.
It's interesting you should say that. The week before Thanksgiving, it was 82 came on, 84 came off. That was the closest par week that we had, and that may have been a little bit for that. So Nikki, this is the question we've been asking everybody forever, and it seems 3 shows a week we're doing this, and somehow or another we stretch it out to hours of conversation. But are we going to see, as Quentin has said, maybe a slowdown over the holidays, or is this winter season just not there? It's spring, summer. There's no middle anymore.
I mean, there is a middle, but compared to what that middle had been, can we really call it a middle, right? So I think it's just a matter of what we're talking about. What are we comparing it to? Yes, it's slowing down just a little bit. And there are still buyers out there who would really, really love to swipe up a house if there was one available, right?
I read an interesting article on Realtor.com that talking about is this Christmas time to buy, and kind of echoed that a little bit. So maybe it's a little bit less buyer. Maybe that buyer pool isn't 12 feet deep anymore. Maybe it's 11 and a half feet deep at this point. But if it's interesting, so if people are out and shopping, they're serious, right? They're usually well-funded, and usually get the contracts pretty quickly.
Well, so what I'm also seeing is I'm seeing buyers who are like, let me just wait till spring, it'll be better. But these are also buyers who were not looking in the past spring, so they did not go through all of that heartache of having to compete in such a fierce market. So they're a little more hopeful, and maybe naive might be the wrong word.
So why it's so good to have you on the show on a regular basis is because you have you manage, if that's the right choice of
It
words, multiple agents. We just, Younger and I see
115 of them.
115 of them. And so what are they telling you?
Well, that is where I am getting this from. I speak to them on a regular basis. I have a group of people I touch base with Monday before I come here, just to be like, hey, how was your weekend?
Well, thank you for doing this.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I'm here, right? What good would that be
So
if I didn't
what-
have
so
good
what was the
information?
feed- what was
Well,
the
so
feedback?
That was part of it, though, is that some of those buyers are like, you know what? We're going to take it easy. If something happens, that's great, but we're not going to feel too much of a rush, and we're looking forward to that spring market. But these are also buyers who have not had to compete in that spring market before.
What do you think, Mr. Mayor?
And I think we were just having a conversation in another group. We have buyers that are ready and willing and prepared, but there's not homes in their price bracket. And it's been interesting as winter has come, we've got probably the same number of those buyers, but the price bracket has shifted to a more expensive price bracket. So if you go back in time, 3, 4, 6 months, buyers that were in 500 and less were looking, they were ready, they were willing, they were prepared, and there was either no or not enough choice to fulfill that need. Those seem to have backed off and or bought or found a place to live. And as we've moved into fall and winter, we're seeing that price bracket move up. So a lot of the buyers we're trying to find homes for now in the brokerage are in the 6, 7, and 8 range.
Yes.
So what about the lower price range? We talked about affordability before
We have not had, I have not seen an increase in those listings or buyers.
Yeah.
Are
Either
you
one.
seeing the area of interest expand because of it? The footprint?
Yes and no. I mean, it's
Yes and no. I mean, I think it depends.
Hold up. We have a proper terminology for that.
Maybe so.
Maybe yes, maybe
Maybe
no,
yes. Maybe no yes.
I think as a general rule, again, we're talking about what are we comparing to. So going back 2 years, absolutely. Comparing to 2 years ago, the geographical footprint that any particular buyer is looking in is expanding, even when they show up the first time and they say they don't want to live outside of a certain range. As they experience the market, their ability to do so goes up. Their desire to do so goes up, much of it forced. Is that still happening now like it was in April? No. But it's still higher than if you track back time to pre-pandemic.
Nikki Chamos?
no, agreed. That's the yes and the no, because it really depends on what we're talking about. But I will say, like, one of the agents I spoke with this morning was talking about buyers who they keep saying they're going to expand their area, but then when it comes down to it, they're like, no, really, these things are important. We want to live in Charlottesville and be able to just in a moment's notice bounce
around
over to the
town.
downtown mall
Yeah.
or head over to UVA or whatever the case may be. And so you can't expand but so far and have that lifestyle.
And I don't know if it's true, but I would wonder how that separates out for second, third, and fourth home buyers versus first-time home buyers. Because I would imagine if we were able to dig into that, you'd see a difference there.
Yeah.
But I don't know what that is.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because there's a realtor. I sent you guys a realtor, a link to realtor.com. They were talking about predictions for 2020, and just so those who are watching the show, there's some crystal balls and all fun stuff coming for the rest of the year because we're going to have fun predicting 2020, 2022. And you know the great things about this show is it's there forever, right?
Yeah.
and people remind you. The guy taps you on the corner.
We've papered the trail.
There was a guy tapped me in the shoulder in Costco not too long ago and said, "Hey, I saw you and you said this and it didn't quite pan out." And I go, "Hey, I got to go. See you later," and left. But you know, we talk about this inventory thing all the time and what we can do to up it a little bit. But you know, I kind of want to. Quentin, if it's okay with you, because you kind of brushed over a couple of things with your presidency. Can you believe that? With your presidency, and you know, you were able to accomplish a couple of big ticket items, or getting close to accomplishing a couple of big ticket items that I want to give you kudos to, because I know you won't take them for yourself, right? But there was 2 big heavy lifts this year that are pretty geekish but very important. One was we did some bylaws changes, which was huge, which are not quite there yet, right?
We have them set up for a vote.
We're not vote yet. And the second thing, which is even, I think, more important, is strategic plan, right? So you guys want to talk, because that's going to set the future for our industry moving forward. And let's face it, we're like what Jerry would say, we're like the largest association in the area for sure.
So, well, we're certainly the largest one in Charlottesville, but we were just talking about presidents before me, and so yes, we have a lot of things that are coming to fruition, and these are things that have been started in presidencies prior to me, and so I often feel like I get credit for the music, and I'm really just the guy in the front of the band with the baton, so I might be keeping the rhythm.
There you go.
You need it?
I think
Oh no, here we go.
He's going to put on the hat.
this is probably a better, no.
He's gonna put on the
Oh,
hat.
come on. I was going to put on mine.
No, that makes me feel warm. And so these are the work of years that we're coming
Of course,
to.
of
But
course.
yes, we do have a bylaws vote set, and this, if you go through our process of strategic planning, which is an important process. If you don't know where you're going, that's where you will get. And so we went through our strategic planning process, and it was very interesting because this surveys hundreds of agents across a wide spectrum of new agents.
In-car only?
Yes, because
Okay.
we're only planning for the association, so
Okay.
we're including our membership, although we incorporate data. And even as we sent out surveys and we had breakout groups and we brought people back, so much of what they were focused on before they spoke to each other was identical.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
It was very, very clear, and so you could tell that realtors are looking in the same direction, and that associations at our level, the state level, and up to the national level are sharing a need to change and a need to focus in better areas. Not that the old ones were always bad, but to be a little more defined in that. And so diversity was a big deal.
Sure.
And with diversity, your first step is removing roadblocks. And the first step to removing roadblocks, if you're not somebody that's had to drive over them or through them, is to know what they are. And so a lot of that has to do with transparency. And so we wanted to revamp our election process, which has been a fine process, but it's been around for a very, very long time. There's as many ways to do the elections for associations as there are associations.
Sure.
So if somebody's using this process that we're voting on changing, I'm not trying to throw them under the bus, but we're working through this big bylaws change in support of diversity and equity.
But bylaws are living documents, right? They're supposed to be changed.
They're supposed to be
period.
changing with the times.
Yeah, sure.
Much as our code of ethics has changed. And so I think we're seeing that move forward on this front. And in many ways, our local association is ahead of the pack on that. And there's a lot of really good commitment to diversity and equity. And I know the city of Charlottesville often gets in the news for things in this realm of topics that are negative. And I just would love to have some people know that there's also groups of us in the city and the surrounding areas that are working to do things in the positive, and maybe from areas you wouldn't expect.
So would you say that's the top priority?
That was one of our top priorities for years now.
Okay.
So this process began 2 years ago. Tom Woolfolk, the prior president, created the first project team for diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is now council and moving forward. And so I'm really interested on Thursday to see that vote happen, and in support of this change. It's gone through a very large vetting process and really ties in nicely with what you've seen in our strategic planning process, which is also going to be sent out on Thursday. But we finished the move to get the bylaws change on the ballot for Thursday, so that's one checkbox. We finished the strategic planning, and so the strategic plan is done, and that will present it on Thursday.
That's going to be a big meeting
checkbox.
Thursday.
Yeah.
And we also have our 501c3 foundation, and we'll be giving it its first check this year so that we have a better vehicle to support the charities that we support.
So I wanted to get this out because, and all kidding aside, we joke around a little bit, but you are a bit of a humble fellow, and you are. You roll your eyes.
It's
None of my friends are all laughing. They're wondering how much I paid him before this.
One of your friends is watching.
Not enough, I can tell you that much.
Richard O'Brien is watching,
Hey, Richie.
and he says, Quinn, put the hat on. Come on.
Oh, please.
Put the hat on.
Put the hat on. I'll put my hat on if you put your hat on, and you know how I feel about my hair and putting hats on. But thank you for doing that, because we talk about on the show all the time on how real estate agents and realtors. Did I get that right?
You
It's
got
only
it right.
two
Work
Work in
syllables.
progress.
Realtors. 2 syllables, not 3. Realtors.
Sorry, folks. Real estate professionals. There we go. Pivot.
Donna Patton's not happy with you right
I
now.
know Donna's not happy with me, and she made me at the event the other day because I was dancing with Yona. Made me go ahead and say it multiple times. I don't
Good.
exactly know what that was all about, but anyway. So the reality of it is, I've done multiple strategic plans for all these boards and commissions I got to sit on. And I'm not saying that because you're sitting here or real estate agents are watching or listening. This was probably the best process I've ever been through. And the reality of it is, on our first go-around, it was a blind survey. It was a blind discussion. We all landed very quickly, I mean, within minutes, on the top ticket items, which was the DEI one, on that diversity, equity, inclusion on that, and it worked itself into the agreement. So, it's important on the show for us to talk about what we all do and what we do to give back to the community, right? It's not about, we do things, it's not all about the mighty dollar, right? And we give back. And when that strategic plan and portions of it gets out, it's going to be pretty evident that this is what we are. We set our core values here.
And I'm particularly proud of our association and the stand for things that agents have taken, both as members in conjunction with the association and both as community members who are just concerned and want to be charitable and help their community. And it's really easy to look around and see this happening. And I also think just props for realtors across the board. I know that we get it wrong as a group, and we often shoot at the right target but don't hit the bullseye. But for a really capitalist, really financially focused group, you would be hard-pressed to find another one that's trying to set its own boundaries of appropriate behavior, what's good for the public trust.
And philanthropic, contribution.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And so
you guys go out of your way.
It's not something that you will commonly see. And so anytime somebody tells me a bad story about a realtor or a real estate professional,
Thank you.
I can think of 2 or 3 that are on the positive side.
Right.
And so I hope we hear more of those.
And we have comments coming in. So this is an interesting one. This is from Mike Jeffries on Twitter. He wants to know if you're a 5th. The Quinn, because I mentioned Quinn.
I am the youngest of 5 full-blooded brothers.
Okay, so was that part of the name?
No, but
Okay, 'cause
my
Quinn, the abbreviation is
Quinn.
fifth.
It's Quentin is
Okay,
my name,
okay.
and my mother's side of the family is Cherokee. My mother was born on the Tahlequah Reservation, so legally she's full-blooded Cherokee. Her great-great-grandfather was one of the 5 civilized tribes that got put on the Dawes rolls. So Senator Dawes is the senator that promulgated the legislation that created the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And to be a recipient of that, you had to, check in and get your name written down. And yes, you're a Native American, Indian, and you can be a part of this, and you have to trace your descent back. His name was Jesse Quinton.
Okay.
And the last son bearing Quinton had all daughters at the time my mother was pregnant. And so based on family fortune, they wanted that name carried on.
There we go. So that's for you, Mike Jeffries, on Twitter. This is from Kevin Higgins on Facebook for you guys. This is a good question. Kevin Higgins, thank you for watching. What are your thoughts on real estate purchasing in the event the stock market experiences a significant correction?
Ooh.
That's a good one for Real Talk tomorrow with the
Yeah.
Erpies watch on the show on Real Talk tomorrow. So we've had a lot of chop with the market, and we're looking at the board here while doing the show. And Quentin, I don't know if you want to take this one to start, but certainly some red on the board. The last couple weeks, we've seen volatility on the markets with Fed Chair Powell pretty much saying the Fed is going to take a step back with backstocking the economy.
Yeah.
We're seeing rates go up. We're seeing the uncertainty of this new, is it Omicron?
Omicron?
Omicron, okay. Uncertainty of this new variant coming in. So Higgins says, your thoughts on real estate purchasing in the event the market's stock experiences a significant correction? Good question.
I mean, first, if you've traced the stock market and Omicron, the first sort of bearishness of the stock market was when they were, Omicron, it's very infectious, and we don't know what it does.
The South Africa border shutdown kind of put the market in a little
That
tailspin.
started it.
Yeah.
And then as more information has come out where there's more articles saying maybe just as contagious as Delta, but seems to maybe also be more mild, so less of an issue, you saw stocks climb back up. And so I think there's a direct correlation. We talk about inflation all the time, that it's based on expectations. Stocks are very much the same thing. Stocks work because we agree or we hope that a certain thing is going to happen in the future. And so I think the upside that you will always have real estate, when there's people with large amounts of money that they just want to park and not have it disappear, is it something you can touch? And if you go through the history of real estate values, for long-term safety and sustaining of income, it's the place to be that has survived all of the other plummets.
So
and has always recovered.
I'll add to that. I've got a 20-year, I've mentioned this before on the show, I have a 20-year running spreadsheet, year-over-year car footprint. And the reason I did the 20 years because it included the time of
the Great Unpleasantness. Also known as the real estate depression.
The real estate depression. And depending on the area, over that 20 years, it was between 3 to 5%, roughly, depending on where you were in that area. But it was between 3 to 5% year-over-year increase. So you even including that depression to do that. And I'm looking at Realtor.com's forecast for 2022. They're looking for a median sales appreciation in 2022 of 2.9, which falls right back into this normal 3%, 4%, 5% rate of appreciation year over year. Does that make any sense to you, Mr. Beckham?
It does. And I think, if we're going to talk about are we putting money in real estate or stocks, you have to sort of think of relative risk. And if you follow housing affordability in comparison to interest rates and inflation and in adjusted dollars, it's a much lower level of risk.
What do you think, Nikki? Jump in here.
No, I agree. And when you're comparing the two items, when I am consulting the basics, right, and someone's questioning whether or not they should invest in real estate, if you compare the two side by side, real estate they're neck and neck at the very, very basic level of going over investing in economics, right? And real estate will pay you during that time as well. So when it comes down to the basics, to me, real estate is and it's what I'm putting my money in. I put my mouth where my money where my mouth is. Like, it's what I know, and it's what I know long term.
So you're talking about your investment
investing
property.
In real estate, absolutely, yeah.
So to speak on that, again, this Realtor.com piece that came out was the 2022 predictions. They're they're expecting rents to outpace price growth somewhere around 7.1% is what they're calling for. And on the 20th of this month, we're going to bring in Susan Reel from Ally Property
Management.
Thank you. To actually talk about that and talk about what it's looking like from the rental perspective and how that's moving and how that impacts, because you can't really segregate one from the other, right? You can't really segregate the rental market from the purchase market because they're they are intertwined. But that was really interesting. And we're going to take some of a deeper dive in this during the week, and once we get our crystal ball and all that fun stuff on what these predictions for 2020.
Nikki.
No, I was just thinking Suzanne is great to work with. I finally signed my agreement with her, so she's now my property manager.
Yay,
so I'm very excited. Yes,
when did that happen?
I want to say it was last week. It was sometime in the last 2 weeks. They all merged together a little bit.
So I can testify to that. That was absolutely in the business space the best decision you ever made.
Oh, I agree. And the fact that it took me
your
long.
rental, right?
He manages our rental, and she managed it so well. If we're blessed and able to do this, we're going to try to acquire some more, because
Absolutely.
it's when you get a phone call from Suzanne, then there's a real issue. Other than that, she handles everything. It's wonderful.
Quentin Beckham.
I'm for it.
Yeah. Ally Property Management, and Susan, you're the best. So this is a follow-up. I'm no expert, but the markets today, even in red, make about as much sense to me as home prices going in 2008. I'm scared to death. I will save this for tomorrow's show as well when the Erpies are on the program. So I'll add to this. We're a bit insulated from more macro trends with UVA in our backyard, which is fortunate. Kevin, I agree that the chop in the market is concerning. And I'm also hesitant and a little trepid to see how this impacts consumer confidence. But I'm in agreement with Quentin and Nikki in that real estate in the long run has proven its value, certainly around here, Keith Smith.
Yeah, and that's the reason I quoted a 20-year spreadsheet, right? You know, if you would at that same spread in some other places like Arizona or Florida or something like that, it might the numbers might look a little bit differently. But part of the affordability struggle here, in Charlottesville region is the fact that the market is so stable, right? And that just kind of impacts it because you don't get these huge swings in property values.
Market is stable. We're well under inventory.
Even in the great time of unpleasantness, it was somewhat stable. We didn't get hit as hard as some of these other jurisdictions. It doesn't mean that didn't impact people. I can raise my hand. I was one of them, right? But globally, from a region, we didn't have the number of foreclosures. We had a lot, but not compared to, say, Phoenix or Las Vegas or something along those lines.
Grayson asked the question: how do you see the market changing with rates going up?
I think it's gonna slow it down. It's gonna have a little bit of a downward pressure on the pricing, as it always does. The big difference being that it's gonna affect affordability. And so like all supply and demand structures, as those rates go up, your ability to buy a home and build equity goes down, and sellers have to respond by lowering a price or no longer letting the price climb. If you look at something to be afraid of as a home buyer, you should be afraid of mortgage rates long before you're afraid of a price. Because over the life of any house, the mortgage rate has a much bigger effect on how quickly you build equity and how much equity you build versus a high rate. If you go back in time to the 80s, the housing affordability index was at its worst.
And I agree with
And that was a function of mortgage rates that were 14, 15, 16, 18%, along with incomes that were relatively consistent, accounted for inflation with what it is today. So even though those prices were a lot lower, the household incomes, as you adjusted down in conjunction with those mortgage rates, made the affordability issues a lot greater.
What do you think, Keith?
Well,
and that is macro. That's not to take away what happens at the local level when you're talking about individual communities that have been disenfranchised, affordable housing compared to local jobs. So that's the big median. And as we always say on this show, and will continue to say, don't let the macro determine your personal decision without having somebody sit with you who is a skilled professional and a
Trusted
trusted
advisor.
to talk through all the ifs and ands, because what's true for a county, a state, a city, or a nation is not always true for you personally.
so the average buyer, with all due respect to the Earpies who we're going to talk to tomorrow, the average buyer really isn't in the stock market. Most average buyers, at this affordability, mid-range price point, their investment is their home. That's their primary.
You're saying most of the buyers you work with don't have some kind of positioning in the stock market, whether a 401k, Roth, or Roth IRA, some kind of company contribution?
Well, they may, but they don't track this stuff like we're talking right now. They have it, they set up, it's a retirement program. Most buyers really trying to figure out, okay, I got this much a month and I can afford, what kind of house can I buy? They don't, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, but diversification is a great thing all the way across the board on that end of it. But I don't know, Nikki, with your conversations with your agents, do you have these conversations? Well, should I put money in the stock market or buy a house? They're trying to put their family in a home by most part, I would think.
Well, I don't think generally they're having people ask them that question.
Sure.
I think at the point they're speaking to a realtor that they're obviously very interested in getting a house, right? But I do think what my agents are experiencing is that a lot of their buyers, and not all, of course, when we were talking about that whole interest rates moving up, there's still going to be a lot of buyers that are still ready, willing, and able to buy. Like that will be a game changer for the ones who are already struggling or are close to that, right? That interest rate makes a huge difference in that mortgage payment.
Yep.
It's unbelievable. The reverse of that is if you make an extra payment a year, you're cutting out a ton of interest, an unbelievable amount, right?
That's my favorite
But
topic.
I know, I love that so much.
No, make it
So
Make it two.
Unfortunately, the people that are going to be hurt the most by something like that are also going to be, impacted the most by even a slight change. So, and that's not, I don't know data-wise if that's the majority of home buyers.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I think what we're talking about is we're talking about different methods of building wealth and investing, meaning taking cash from today and moving it into the future at a rate where it does not lose value because of inflation. There's vehicles for doing that. And what we started talking about with the stock market, and it went down, it went up, that's maybe 2% of the population. These are people that either have folks working for them or they're trading actively day to day, week to week, month to month because they're following companies. It's not the same as a 401k that is managed in mutual funds and is designed to have a safe 5 to 6% return when you have people in the stock market getting 20 and 25% returns. So there's top level, bottom level, and then what most of America does in terms of building wealth is owning a home and having an asset in which they build up equity while it's also appreciating.
So we got a couple mortgage brokers coming in on Friday to talk this exact topic, kind of take a look at what we're ending and moving forward. But again, according to this Realtor.com article, which goes from the National Mortgage Brokers Association, they're predicting between 3.3 and 3.6. So we have to be careful about this conversation about it.
3.3 and 3.6 is such cheap money.
Well, that's I
your
think
point.
The point I'm trying. That
Yeah.
A and B. Even though a half a point makes a difference and a half a point can make difference to folks, we're not talking about going from 3 to 6.
Correct.
Right? We're not talking about going 3 to 8 or 3 to 18 like I had in my first home on that end of it. So
I wonder how much, and I apologize for interrupting you. I wonder how much the inventory pinch we're having now is rates being so low, folks are refinancing and choosing to stay in the homes even longer because they have this refinance option, pull some money out, and or just fixing their home up and staying in the house longer.
Well, that's different money, right? That there's different rates for refis versus purchases, and it's a little. I don't want folks to get confused that we're, because refi rates could go up or go down. The requirements are up and down a little bit on that end of it. But it could be. I mean, if they can't find what they want to buy, they can stay in there. Or, from my perspective, what I hope not to see is they can't buy something, the rent's going up 7 or 8% or whatever it is, and it's now putting stress on their food insecurity and different stresses on their family when they can get into it. Mr. Beckham, you're thinking.
Yeah, he's got the wheels turning. I see.
You said food. I was thinking of Thanksgiving. The cost for a Thanksgiving dinner to feed 10 last year was the lowest it has been in 35 years, because that is a metric economists follow.
And this year?
And this year it is 2.5 times more expensive than it was last year.
Right.
So last year's cost to feed a family of 10 for a traditional dinner with canned cranberry sauce and a 14-pound turkey was $25 and some change, roughly.
It's roughly $50 now, right?
And now it's like 54.
54, yeah.
And a lot of why it's 54 is because there was a lot of media talk about turkeys and the lack of turkeys.
Yeah.
So people went out and bought all the turkeys,
Right.
and we created a dearth of turkeys. So then when more turkeys came in, they were way more expensive than the first set of turkeys, and we made our own problem.
What's the psychology behind that? Why do we do that?
It's the same thing that happened with the toilet paper. And
It's
the Christmas
crazy.
gifts.
And the gas.
And the
The
Clorox.
gas station.
No, I had
Gasoline.
chicken.
gas-
I don't
So-
understand that
Because
psychology.
Because we're
behind
selfish people by nature, is what it comes down to.
it. I disagree with that. But
I mean, that explains it, though, doesn't it? They're hoarding stuff.
yeah, well,
Get a
Mr.
potato.
Beckham wants to add something to that.
So I think there's parts of this equation that are very fluid that are really going to affect what you're talking about. When is renting appropriate and when is it not appropriate? And at what point do we push renters into buying homes they didn't want and don't meet their top 10 or only meet 2 out of their top 10? Or maybe they only meet 1, which is that it's cheaper than the rent I'm going to have to pay next year. I'm not so sure that I'm opposed to that, so long as they can still put food on the table. We've also seen some really good wage increases across the board. In spite of everything you're saying about people being unemployed, people who are employed are making more money this year than they made last year and the year before. And we had that terrible jobs report, was it last quarter, and we suddenly found another 90, we had like an Easter egg of 95,000
Wherever they
jobs.
came- wherever they
Like,
came
oh,
from.
oops, sorry, just, 95,000 more
Welcome to
employed
the
people.
governmental statistics.
So I think there's lots of there's lots of opportunity for this to change when we talk about stocks and things that affect people's ability to buy a home. The only thing that's affecting the housing market right now in a way that is really impacting consumers is the inventory.
Well, I want to take a dive into that in a minute because I've got a stat here which blew my socks off this morning. But Nikki, what do you think about what we've been talking about so far?
There's so many topics there and so many things that just kind of had little flags going off in my head. But one of those is that when I'm talking to somebody or when I had been talking to someone about whether or not it's worth renting versus buying when they can't find the house that they want, the next conversation to have is can this be a step in your life as far as investing? Because a lot of times these same people are people who are not thinking about investing in that way. And so not only could this be an opportunity for them to stop paying rent and have ownership, it could be the first step in them realizing that they truly can build wealth and build a future and not just be exchanging, time for money
Well, Ray
all the
Cadell,
time.
who watches this show, and Ray, if you're watching, let us know, watches this show routinely. He said, in his opinion, maybe not everyone is destined to own in their lifetime. And that's okay.
Well, I'll tell you.
That's how he says it.
I can tell you, my mother and father were the first generation to ever own a home. I was my first generation within the Smiths. On my mother's side, actually, same thing. First generation ever to own a home. They've always rented prior to that. A lot of it has to be you grew up in New York City and
Sure.
you were in apartments.
Super expensive.
No, you just lived in an apartment. That's what you did, right?
So maybe, and I know this is a real estate show, and for the sake of a talk show, maybe the repositioning of the American dream should be perhaps not as strong home ownership.
I guess I would ask, what is the why there? Why would they not be homeowners?
I would push back on
Well,
that.
I mean, you as you should, considering the business. you
No,
guys
not
are
even
in.
that, because here's my thought. Even the people that I know, and one of my best friends is someone who actually just bought his house, but for a long time was like, what, I don't want to buy a house for myself. But he was open to buying one as an investment because that's just smart. But he didn't want to do the changing of a hot water heater when it went out. So for him, it was well worth renting. There was no desire to take care or manage that house.
To go back to
Right?
Exactly right. To go back to this whole conversation about most people aren't watching their phone. Like I just got a text that the stock market went up 500 points. Says we've been talking on this. Must be real talk and impact on the stock market. The reality of it is the generational wealth is always wrapped around home ownership. And my grandparents, great-grandparents, all, I remember this like it was yesterday. They just never had the wealth, generational wealth, when they passed on. My parents we will. So the best way to build generational wealth is to own. And I can speak to that as a chairman of a land trust, that it works. And when you're able to generate through home ownership generational wealth, it makes a huge difference.
And I'm 100% in agreement there. We all own real estate. You guys are in the real estate game. We service the supply chain that is real estate. What my point is prices are as expensive as they've ever been. We can make a legitimate statement that it's the most expensive time now to buy a home than ever before. Is that safe to say?
I would disagree with that.
Yeah, I think it depends on how we're counting
You
that.
would disagree with that?
Totally disagree with it.
Okay, because you're going to base it on when you bought your first home, when interest rates were 18%?
That's exactly right.
How much was the cost of that home when you bought it?
$150,000.
$150K.
$150K, I pay 18%. So somebody who's smart,
And what is that in
was
today's money?
What was the price of the home now?
probably 300, 350.
So it's 2x plus.
So we'll do this because I'm not smart enough to.
Well, we just need a mortgage calculator to
But
figure this out.
you also have to factor inflation.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you bought a house for $200,000 in January of 2000,
Okay.
it would cost $310 today,
Yeah.
without ever having increased in price.
That's terrifying. Did you hear
So
what he
it did.
said?
So when we talk price, we have to be sharing a common idea of what price is, and price is not always the dollar account.
That's fair.
It's
I'm
the
with
buying
you.
power.
Yeah.
So 200,000, 21 years ago, 310 now.
Sure.
So when you start rolling this all back, I think he has a really fair point about affordability, because wages are not the same, the value of the dollar is not the same. The prices are certainly not the same.
Oh, by the way, I had
And
to put
neither is
20,
mortgage
I
interest.
had to actually put 20% down.
Yeah, but you didn't have.
And he walked uphill to school.
Yeah, I know. In the
in the
snow,
snow.
both
barefooted.
It was terrible.
Yeah, barefooted both ways.
Was
Yvonne,
terrible.
can you hear what he's saying? It's
And he
true.
Had to kill a bear with his loose leaf notebook
Did you have?
just to get to
Well,
class.
that's assuming I can read
Did you have a
and write.
multiple offer situation when buying your first home?
No,
Did you have a competitive buyer pool when buying your first home?
no.
And you had to put 20% down.
Had to put 20% down.
Did you have a trusted counselor when you bought your first home?
Yes,
You did.
yes,
Nice.
At the lake.
yes,
Who was it?
yes. Maybe no, yes.
No, yes. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Keep saying.
And I think too, I want to go back to you talking
You know,
about
a gentleman does not disclose. I'm just saying.
Okay, you don't kiss and tell.
I want to talk about the American dream for
Please,
a second.
please.
Because I do think the American dream needs to shift.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes.
So
I think
they-
that's the
Yes.
I
point
think the
Jerry's
American dream needs
trying
to
to
shift.
make.
But I also think how we think about it has to shift. So, the American dream is very rarely about the specific home you live in the neighborhood, and that's been really tied closely as sort of a red herring.
Yeah.
The American dream is about being able to retire. It's about things you do with your family. It's about kids. It's about charities you support. The American dream means different things to different people. The vehicle to achieve those has stolen the attention.
What does that mean?
Because the reason I want Judah to own a home
Yeah?
is not because I think his life will be complete.
Okay. Judah
It's-
does, though.
Well, I know, but he's doing.
It's about Liza and
It's
about
I
Liza.
want Liza to be a homeowner so that she can retire a wealthy dog.
Liza's
But
the dog.
I think the point is, if I have a dream to support a charity or to take a trip or to travel the world, one of the fastest ways to create the margin in my life's finances to get there is to fix my housing costs.
Okay.
Because-
I'm with you.
Well, we talk about this. I'm
I'm in
sorry,
agreement
Nikki.
there.
Oh, you're
we're not.
good.
Please.
Oh,
jump
no,
in
I'm
anytime
so
you
here
want.
for this. It's good.
But that is the best way to hedge against inflation.
It
Sure.
Is to own, because otherwise you're going to pay 7%.
Absolutely.
And
But here's my point: the dream is not the house.
it's about how you live in it.
The
No,
dream is other
saying
stuff.
Is the options that come with disposable income.
When
That's what he's saying.
I will bet you to all of the ERPs watching, when
They
their
are?
clients come in, they don't say, or even if they say it, they don't mean, I want to buy a stock today worth $10 that's worth 1,000 10 years from now.
Oh, I don't know. I said that to them.
What they're really getting at is I have a really large family of ungrateful children, and at some point I just know I'm going to have to continue supporting them, and I would like to own enough homes that I can live by myself. How do I get there?
That's exactly right. It's
How
not
do
about
I
the
put
dollar. That's exactly
How do
right.
I put kids through college when even public institutions like UVA are raising the tuition? How do I pay for health care? How do I not panic at every time
you're-
a turkey price
So,
goes
so
up?
Nick,
And
let's
so
get Nikki in the conversation.
There's a
guys.
lot of stuff there.
Because I want to ask Nikki a question, because we're going
Go,
to
Nikki.
pivot,
Oh,
pivot
dear.
away from this a little bit,
Aw.
right?
What is the question?
No, because I'm going to change it a different way.
Okay.
So when you
on it.
sit down and when you sit down and have your first sit down with a buyer, what does that look like? What does that conversation start? How do you start that conversation? What's the first things that come up? How do you have your W questions with it? Jerry's going to jump in.
Yeah,
with his-
I
Je-
you
Jerry,
finish that thought.
Jerry
You finish
likes
that
his
thought.
likes his.
I do like the star one here. And I don't mean to jump in here. Isn't the reality in this market especially, not everyone's going to be able to buy a home in this market?
No, and we know that.
But
and
you
we-
say this market. Couldn't that be any market? Because I would say it is.
I would say this market, and I'm going to get out of your way, I would say this market is more unique than most because of the impact and influence of UVA and because of the impact and influence of severe inventory shortages. Okay, I would say Southwestern Virginia, or take where my folks are from, or living now, not where they're from, but living now, Western North Carolina. You have much more affordable options on the market there.
See, the other side of that coin, though,
It's
is
the-
that
it's the
because of
wages.
UVA and NGIC and all of these things that provide us stability is why we're not, as a whole, compared to other places, feeling the last few years as hard as other places have.
100%.
And so it's
100%.
great that it's cheaper to live in those places, yet that economic stability is very different.
What do you think of the gentleman next to you?
I think that hat suits him, and it matches
watching.
his suit. This is glorious.
He's looking good. So look at the screen right now. He's got his wizard's hat on, and he's got his wizard's wand.
I thought I
does.
just heard the hat say Slytherin.
He's got his wizard's wand.
No.
Oh, it's not the choosing hat? I thought it was the choosing hat.
No, it's not
because
the-
I figured
the
the
sorting
old
hat.
dude needed to wear the old dude Gandalf hat.
Michael Plecker of Yes Realty Partners says this: sometimes it takes a few generations to create generational wealth. Not everyone will necessarily achieve wealth with their first home purchase. It's about those that come after you that can learn and benefit from your sacrifices in buying their first home in your family. I agree with that. I'm 100% in agreement here. We're going to have, you guys are the pros. I just have a microphone here.
Well,
And a wand.
And a wand.
And a wand.
Wow, you're
So
a
I
little
do
more
think-
voluminous right now.
Really?
I know,
Really?
it
Thank
messed up
you.
your hair.
Thank you.
Now he's
Thank
going to be
you. Thank you.
self-conscious,
You
Jerry.
know,
That
the
was
only
not
thing he's most
nice.
self-conscious about is
Oh
the
my
hair.
gosh, you just did that.
Only that.
When you reach a certain age, you're really happy it stays in and it starts to consume your
Thank you,
attention.
Mr. Beckham.
You have good hair.
Thank you.
You're like, it can be as gray as it wants so long as it stays
You
right
have good
there.
hair. It looks good.
You know what though, when it comes to that whole having the buying, right, and now being the time or not the time and all of these conversations, because I bought my house in Charlottesville right before the stuff hit the fan, right?
You're saying 08,
So,
09?
what?
08, 09?
No, wrong stuff hitting the fan.
Before
2019.
COVID. Okay, got it. So you bought at a great time.
Well, kind of, yes, I did. And I was doing so as a self-employed person who was trying to make numbers do magic with only 2 years of, building that business. Buying as a self-employed person is a challenge in and of itself. But where I'm trying to go with this, though, is that for me, that house was in no way my ideal house. It
Okay.
was the one that I had the opportunity to buy. And my reason for buying was this building of wealth and building a future. So it comes back to Keith's question of, what is that conversation I have with those buyers
That's
when I
exactly
sit
right.
down? And that conversation is, what do you want?
So
and
you
it's
don't
not
start with
just what
money.
do you
That's the
want.
point I'm trying to make.
No, it's what are you looking for?
That's
Because
exactly
that is
right.
huge. And digging a little deeper, because that first answer is often not going to be a full answer. It is going to be a very surface answer. And you have to know to ask more questions and how to ask those questions and figure out what it really is they're looking for.
And then
Money's
you
the
bring-
vehicle, not the goal.
Yes.
And then you bring 3 decades, in my case, of doing this. And it's funny, you said when the stuff hits the fan, what 3 decades of doing this? Because I've seen this go up and down. You know it's going to hit the fan, and you learn. Let's step to the side a little bit, let it hit the fan, and then come back in and go ahead and handle it from there. But that's, these things are always been cyclical, right? I mean, I remember when I got in, like I said, 87, 88, when I got in, it was different problems, different struggles, but it was harder than hell for a first-time home buyer to buy a house. The lending requirements were ridiculous. I could not get a VA loan. I just served my country for 6 years, and I couldn't get a bleeping VA loan.
That's messed up.
Because the VA was messed up. And I went to the market, and it cost me 20% cash out of my
Yeah.
pocket. I was blessed enough to save some money on the black market. Excuse me, did I say that out loud? When I was in the Soviet Union? Oops, sorry.
Kevin McMullen, hello. Donna Patton, hello. We're going to get to the comments coming in here. This is from Mustache Dan Pettit. I am holding a wizard's wand. He's giving props to Quit on his jacket. This is one of his 2 very deluxe jackets. This is all. There's 3. Three.
Ooh.
They're all tailored and fitted right on 4th Street, right?
That's correct.
Did you enjoy a bourbon while doing the fitting?
I did not, but you
Because
can.
they have there at Alton Lane.
Yeah, I was too early in the day for that.
Okay, really?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Early in the day.
Excuse me.
Yeah, we can move on.
Excuse me, sorry everybody, that was a cough, I apologize.
This comment, is it wise to invest in any town that has a university? I would say
Yeah, the answer to that
absolutely.
is yes, yeah. If you just go and look, I mean, it's a simple search can figure that out, generally,
I'm not a fan of blanket answers. I think you need to look at the market.
Yeah.
And should that maybe be a reason to be more positive toward it? Sure, but you need to look at the market.
QB, Rosemary Postel, hello.
Hi. Yeah, I agree with you. I think you have to look at the market. And I think that we're seeing, we talk a lot about macro stuff. We're also seeing a lot more macro things become true consistently. So like if you didn't want to live in Chicago, you could live in Charlotte because it was so much cheaper to live there, and that's not true anymore.
Yeah,
they're the
Charlotte's
same
super
price.
expensive. Yeah.
You know, so I think it's a matter of timing and your individual motivation and what's important to you, which requires you sit down with somebody. And I really think, although how we do things is differently, that initial part of designing what our people's goals are probably something the ERPs experience similarly at Emergent Financial. You know, we're talking a lot about vehicles because that's how we operate. They have certain vehicles that they use to get people to their goals. So do we. And when we talk about wealth, that doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. Wealth is really just the tools I need to do the things I want to do.
Keith Smith.
So to go back to the importance of home ownership, and I didn't know we were going to have this conversation. I just happened to pull this report from Harris Poll. Harris Poll polled 2,000 U.S. adults that recently bought. 82% of them bought a home in lieu of getting married. They decided to use the amount of money, which is pretty, I just went through.
Such a better investment.
Oh my God. I tried that with both my daughters. It did not work, by the way.
Such a better investment.
Totally.
You said to both your daughters, instead of doing this wedding, elope, and we'll give you this money for a down payment.
And I did. And they didn't.
That's brilliant, though.
But 82% would rather, because look, what's an average wedding these days?
50K.
30, 40,
It's quite an
50.
industry. It's quite an industry.
And this
More than I
market,
see
I'd
down
say
payments.
50K plus.
Yeah, or more.
Yeah.
And so let's think about that, right? If you're buying a $300,000 house and you don't have to put 20% down anymore, like you used to, and you can put 5% down or something like that, that number actually works. The real struggle with it, and I'm trying to get some work on it, the reason they didn't took it was, no, Daddy, you're not getting away that easy. And, oh, by the way, when we move into the place we're going, you're going to help out there too. But that's a whole different discussion on that end of it. But it's the student debt that's impacting these young folks. And I plan to bring that up a little bit tomorrow with the ERPs on how that's impacting, and on Friday with the loan officers on how student debt is doing that. And because what happened in the time of great unpleasantness, everybody kind of went to college and everybody kind of got all this college debt. And now it's like, oops, because they're now at this buying age, right? But 82% decided to buy a house.
Michael, to Quentin, wealth to me and how I position it to first-time home buyers simply means security.
Yeah, frequently. I mean,
Well,
if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, let's do it in a financial sort of status. You know, food and shelter is lowest on that, and I have to pay for it somewhere. And so particularly if I feel like I'm in that lower echelon, which is how I have felt most of my life in terms of income, I want to pick a payment that I can afford and stick it and keep that pin in it for 5 or 10 years, because then I know it's not going to change on me.
Nikki Chambliss.
Yeah, well, and when just kind of the whole conversation comes back around, when you're talking about to that buyer, if they can view this as a stepping stone, because the likelihood that this house that they're purchasing is some final place they're going to stay for the rest of their lives, for most people that I've worked with of varying ages, is very unlikely. There's a very, very small percentage of people that's where they're going to stay forever. So if you can view this as a stepping stone, it broadens what you're willing to do, where you're willing to live. Like, I don't have a garage. I would love for my motorcycle to be in a garage. And yet, my next house will have one. This one will not.
I got
right?
an extra room in my garage.
I
love
don't
this.
know how I feel about that.
And not to be morbid, but you know, we've gone through a couple years where people's personal issues, whether it's health, childcare, children's health, or even a death in the family, have been at a much higher rate than they were in years past. And yes, you should have health insurance, and yes, you should have life insurance, but if you owned your home for 15 years, you have a whole nother insurance policy in that home, because you have all of this cash that you can access to deal with healthcare needs, to deal with family needs, to do the things you need to do. That is part of why we see disenfranchised groups being less successful, because they don't have this backup multi-use insurance policy that is homeowners equity.
Yeah.
That they can use for anything. And so every transmission failure, every time some Jeep Cherokee's transfer case goes out, Jason, they don't have any sort of support that's always that can always be the final crack on the ice.
And here's another reality, because we're personally, Yona and I are personally dealing with it. I mean, this is, again, to continue the mobility conversation. People are outliving their income. People outliving their cash. And 25% of the sales last year were multi-generational. We're dealing with this with our family right now, where, the health is good, but they're in their early 80s, mid 80s. And we're probably, we're trying to convince them to sell their home, cash out now. Can't think of a better time to do that. So they have cash to last the rest of their lives, and they'll come live with us.
And I do want to, I have to go back to the trusted counselor thing. I can't stop myself. Suzanne with Ally Property Management, we had a lot of renters go into forbearance as well.
Yep.
And so they did not have to pay their rent. They got to stay. They were not evicted. Their landlords also went into forbearance if they can afford the mortgage payments. And there's a percentage of those renters that did not, not hers necessarily, across the state, that didn't access the programs to help them catch up on rent, that helped the landlord catch up on mortgage, that got things out of forbearance. And I know for a fact that she went through with several tenants and landlords and helped them do just that. Mm-hmm. But you needed that trusted counselor. You needed that advisor who was a willing participant and invested in your well-being to do that. The same thing is true as we talk about all of these houses coming out of forbearance. There were 7.7 million that went into forbearance. 50% of them are back on track and being paid. 23% of them have refinanced. And out of what's left, you've got about 38,000 houses in foreclosure. Statistically,
but that's nationwide.
Nationwide. And statistically, almost 75% of those people have 20% or more in equity.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't have to have a foreclosure that tanks their credit for the next 7 years. Mm-hmm. If they have an advisor that helps them walk through it. Statistically speaking, 40% of those people with equity will still go into foreclosure even though they have an out. And I think much of that is a lack of education, a lack of somebody to help them through it.
They don't know what to do.
But it also could be big ticket items like health scenario. I mean, some there's other reasons.
He's saying
for
that
them.
they just should pull on the equity in the house to make sure that they don't go into foreclosure.
Well, so generally what happens with that is, they don't know what their options are. That's the reason they should be listening to Real Talk. They don't know what their options are. They know, and to go back to the Suzanne thing, I've personally referred her other landlords that were using different property management to help that landlord get that money, because their property management company couldn't do that,
or wasn't willing to put in the work.
Maybe. Well, we'll leave that.
Yeah.
Leave that alone.
Because it just required bringing the paperwork to the tenant and having them sign.
I just got a text from my mother. I'm not moving in the basement.
Well, none of this stuff is simple. Even selling your house in a good day, in a normal fashion, is not simple.
Sure.
We do this every day, and really good agents may make it look simple to the clientele, but there's 1,000 steps from deciding you're going to sell your home to actually getting a check at the other end. And so I think having somebody that knows the process, that you trust, who is a good advisor with good experience in education and a good skill set to walk you through it is worth every penny that you pay for that. And we and the Earpies and other folks have built whole businesses on that and survived because it's true. If it was not true, we would not be here.
Nikki.
Yeah, no, agree 100%. And I think having like Suzanne to be able to help with things like this, because while it might seem like a simple process, when you're drowning, it's not. It's yet another thing. So when you're already struggling with paying that mortgage or paying that rent, but it's just another thing to figure out. And oftentimes people don't have the bandwidth to do so. So when you have that trusted advisor step in and give you a life vest and help pull you into the lifeboat, right? That's what's needed.
Well
Again,
said.
Realtor.com. We're talking about moving forward. There's 45 million millennials between the age of 26 to 35 that they're going to be in 2022. And they're all in the prime buy-in end of it. So we're going to rally back around to this inventory struggle that we've been talking about forever. And so how do we get there? How do we increase this? I think interest rates going up a little bit will help that. But on the supply side, We talk about this, red tape to green tape and all that kind of great stuff. I mean, any magic thoughts from the two geniuses sitting to my right and Jerry's left on
I mean, we're going to be in this pinch forever. Don't you think, Quentin? It's not going to change anytime soon.
Well, I'm about ready to quote a stat that's going to...
We are not getting out of the inventory shortage soon because it's been around we've been working on it for 12 or 13 years now. So yes, that's true. And
it's a coveted area. New employers are opening up
and
shops
there
here.
are moments where the housing market is like every other market. It's just like turkeys. It's just like gasoline. The issue is the flow and the smooth quality of the market more so than the market product itself. So do I want the market to calm? Yes, because I think that will handle some of the issues that we're dealing with. I think we're going to see inventory come on in spring in our area, just like we always do, because people will have to move. A smoother market will get more people into their transition better than some of the craziness that we've experienced in the last 2 years. And we really need better ability for developments to come to fruition at a faster pace, at a higher density.
So a stat that I just read this morning, so I get alerts from the National Home Builders Association, which I'm going to track this carefully, which just totally rocked my world. I'm going to actually read it. The U.S. Commerce Department moved forward with an administrative review to double the tariffs on Canadian lumber shipments from 9 to 18%.
Substantial.
So hold it, time out. We just got lumber to stabilize, right? And I don't understand why this is happening. I don't know where it's in and what the rationale behind it, but that was the top sentence on that. So if we're saying adding new inventory to the market is helpful, right, across the board, and if we are now going back to doubling the tariff on it up from 9 to 18% or 10 to 20 for simple guys like me, adding 10% to that just on lumber, what is that going to trickle down? That just scared the heck out of me when I saw that this morning.
And on top of that, you can't find subcontractors to work.
Oh, that's a whole different...
You can't find land to build upon. And Plucker just said, just wait until Fannie and Freddie lower their requirements again on top of low housing inventories.
That's a scary thought.
Do you want to touch on that?
I don't know. I just got chills up my back. I think...
No, I don't.
You do not want to touch on that.
Next subject.
We're already at 11:20.
He's
That's a whole other hour.
The loan requirements will be a little bit easier to get money, is what he's alluding to.
I get what he's alluding to.
You want to touch on that, Nikki?
Those same people who having those requirements lowered, what house are they going to get? And they're the same group of people who last year I spoke with, and many of them decided, you know what, they were going to wait. And I told them, I was like, if you're going to wait, that's great. Be saving. Be saving. Have money, put it aside. Because what you're going to need is more money to have more power to negotiate to get a house. And if you're going in still trying to roll in your closing costs, which is still doable, people are still doing that. But you need more of that buying power. You need better negotiation. You need to be able to say, hey, this is what I have, and it be a firm offer instead of being on the verge of having a credit score that barely makes it. So right now, while you're waiting to try to find that house or while you're actively looking even, get that credit score improved. Be saving the money.
So we're going to dive into that in great length on Friday. But,
Awesome.
Scott?
Yep. But it goes back to what Quentin said about trusted advisors, right? So this iPhone, all this stuff is not going to do this. Sometimes us as agents have to have the hard conversation with the client, right? Or the loan officer has to have a hard conversation with the client. You realize, you have to have this conversation so that we can have our ethics and make sure somebody doesn't get into a home that we know they can't afford, right? And I know enough. We work with enough agents in this region, and they're all across the board like that. But that's where you need the trusted advisor, to go back to Quentin's terminology, to help you stay away from that, and to help guide and educate you through that process. Maybe now's not the time to buy, but you're 100% right. This is what happened to the run up of 2008. This cup of coffee could have bought a $500,000 house.
Well, and the thinking with Fannie and Freddie is the more people getting access to cash could create more equity or an equitable ecosystem for homeowners.
Yeah, so we got to
The
take
downfall of that is it could also lead to some defaults and some foreclosures.
Well, I tell the story all the time about the time run up to the prior of
We'll
time.
pay you to take a loan?
That's exactly right. When I had lenders walking into my office and offering millions of dollars for a development and said, "Oh, by the way, we'll pay you 1.5% to borrow the money," I said, "Get the hell out of my office." Right? The thing is we're not hearing any of that, right? We're not hearing any of that. The appraisal requirements, are more stringent. We're in a really good place for that. So maybe it could be walked back a little bit, but and we're all going to watch it. If it starts going back to, hey, I'm going to pay you 1.5% to borrow $10 million, we're going to be in trouble.
There are economic risks in our future, and they are not the same risks from our past.
Yeah. I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
What risks are you concerned about?
Again, it's 1126.
Yeah?
It's a different show.
I'm saying that's a whole nother show.
It's 11:26,
And that's a whole nother show.
and I'm on my third cup of coffee. So,
But
Nice.
what does the stock market like? It
Yeah.
likes predictability. Predictability means smooth markets, and that's the same thing is true of housing. And so all of the craziness that has happened for the last 2 years, although we've weathered it well, and although there's been a lot of money shoved around and wealth created, it's time to be calmer and it's time to be a little more predictable. We want smoother markets for all of the markets. If there is a big risk to economies across the board, it has to do with unpredictability and things that are probably not what you would think of.
All set?
And there's a good list of those, but
So some
Pick
of the shows we got working up, we're going to bring Tad in from Segura
Yeah.
Solar. We're not going to get it today, but we finally finished our Segura Solar for our particular house. We got the quote in front of us, and I want to bring Tad in to talk about. I didn't realize how much actual money this is making me to be on my roof, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. That's a pretty neat, and it's going to cost me literally zero down, and my monthly payment to put it on there is half of what my utility bill used to be, and it's pretty. I was shocked when I read it.
What day is this happening? What show is
I got to
this?
sign it first. Well,
No,
actually,
but-
let me
the
rephrase
show.
that.
What show?
Mrs. Smith needs to sign it first.
Yes, we do know that.
What show? Don't
talk
know.
about benevolent overlord.
Okay.
You know me and you say that?
Yoda is.
There's a reason my debit card only has a certain dollar amount on it.
Very smart lady, that Yona Smith.
Oh, look at the shirt. Open up the shirt
Yes,
there. Let's
Realty
see the
Partners. It
logo.
looks
Look at
good.
you, brother.
Nice.
Thank you.
Good looking
Look
logo,
at
yeah.
you, man.
I am the business onion. I have layers. There's KW. There's Yes Realty.
Well, never stop.
Oh, you just
Stop,
did the
stop,
t-shirt.
You
stop, stop.
got is it the Grateful Dead lining? Is
Yeah,
that what it
we're
is?
just. He
Stop,
told me to stop.
Stop.
Nikki Chambliss, you were on point today.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
And Michael pointed out that you are a trusted real estate advisor, and you can tear it up on the dance floor.
That actually, yeah.
That is true.
That happened Saturday night.
And
I
she's in a
did. It was
band.
great.
I was witness to this.
She's in a band. Keith Smith, good show tomorrow. How about a tease for tomorrow?
Yeah, so we're going to have the Erpies here. We have a lot of fun. It seems like we're going to continue the conversation. They were asking me what the topics were going to be for tomorrow. I said, "You watch today, then we'll talk about what the
There you
topics
go.
tomorrow." And then on Friday, we're going to have a couple loan officers in to talk about that. So I'm excited about it. Last week was pretty much Batman and Robin week, which I had a ton of fun.
Me too.
And we're back to getting some good content out there.
Allied Property Management guys, one of the presenting sponsors of the show, Closer Title and Settlement Company. Closer Title and Settlement Company and Allied Property Management, two brands you can count on. Quentin Beckham, Nikki Chambliss, Keith Smith, Real Talk and the Monday Market Monitor on a Monday, guys, here on the I Love Seville Network. Thank you kindly for joining us.
Thank you.
You're going to wave the wand here before we go?
I don't know what to wish for.
Just whatever
Wait, I'm
you
going to do
want.
it quietly. It's like a birthday wish.
Did
I
it
can't
come
tell you.
true?
I'll tell you on Friday.
Okay. Wait. Oh, that's the last day?
No,
this
Thursday's my last day, but I'll tell
Thursday's
you on
his
Friday.
last day. If you see Quentin Beckham, Tell them thank you for a job well done
Yeah,
as CART president during a pandemic.
Absolutely.
And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Thank you,
and thank you,
guys.
Nikki.
Oh.
Thank you, Quentin. And we're going to have to wrap up because I was on 3 cups of coffee. So
Smith needs to hit the head.
And I need to
you
hit
guys
the
have
head.
a good morning. We will catch you guys next time. Take care.
thank you, guys. Thank you.